4,000 years ago, in the fertile lands near the Dead Sea, stood two legendary cities whose names would echo through history for thousands of years, Sodom and Gomorrah. Long before the fire from heaven, before fear and destruction, these cities were alive with wealth, trade, music, and celebration. To travelers crossing the harsh deserts of the ancient world, they looked like paradise itself. The morning sun rose slowly over the Jordan plain, casting golden light across green fields and flowing streams. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm wind while farmers guided oxen through rich soil. Shepherds led massive flocks of sheep across grassy hills, and merchants prepared their caravans for another profitable day. From a distance, Sodom appeared magnificent. Tall stone walls surrounded the city, protecting its crowded streets and luxurious homes. Colorful fabrics hung from market stalls, and the smell of baked bread, roasted meat, and exotic spices filled the air. Traders arrived from distant lands carrying gold, perfumes, silk, precious stones, and rare goods from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Canaan. The city never truly slept. As the gates opened each morning, crowds poured into the marketplace. Men shouted prices while customers argued loudly over deals. Blacksmiths hammered glowing metal into tools and weapons. Pottery makers shaped clay jars with expert hands, while women sold woven baskets, olive oil, and jewelry decorated with silver and bright gemstones. Children ran laughing through narrow streets, chasing each other between crowded stalls. Musicians played drums and flutes in public squares while dancers entertained wealthy nobles sitting beneath shaded tents. Water fountains cooled the hot air, and servants carried trays of fruit and wine to rich merchants enjoying the pleasures of city life. To outsiders, Sodom looked blessed beyond imagination. The land surrounding the cities was unusually fertile compared to the dry wilderness nearby. Rivers and underground springs fed the crops, allowing wheat, dates, figs, and grapes to grow in abundance. Huge storage houses overflowed with grain, and wealthy landowners counted their riches proudly. But beneath the beauty and prosperity, something darker was growing. As wealth increased, so did greed. The rich became obsessed with pleasure, power, and luxury. Lavish feasts lasted through the night while the poor struggled in the shadows of the city walls. Powerful men demanded respect through fear instead of kindness. Travelers and strangers were often viewed with suspicion rather than hospitality. The cities had everything people desired: wealth, comfort, entertainment, and freedom, yet many hearts had become cold. In the grand halls of the wealthy, servants rushed endlessly to satisfy every demand. Gold cups overflowed with wine while musicians played for nobles dressed in expensive robes. Outside those same homes, hungry families searched for scraps of food, ignored by people too distracted by pleasure to care. Still, life continued normally. Every sunset painted the skies red and orange over Sodom and Gomorrah. Smoke rose from cooking fires as families gathered for evening meals. Merchants counted coins from the day's profits while guards watched from the city walls. In the distance, caravans carrying new travelers slowly approached the glowing cities of the plain. No one imagined that these powerful cities, full of life, wealth, and pride, were moving toward a destiny that would shock the ancient world forever. For now, Sodom and Gomorrah stood at the height of their glory. Beautiful, rich, powerful, and dangerously blind to the warning signs growing around them. As the sun climbed high above the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, daily life moved with energy and noise. Thousands of people filled the streets from morning until late at night. Merchants, servants, farmers, nobles, travelers, and laborers all lived side by side inside the crowded stone walls of these wealthy cities. But although the cities looked united from the outside, society was deeply divided. The rich lived lives of luxury that ordinary people could barely imagine. Inside the homes of wealthy merchants and rulers, colorful carpets covered the floors, oil lamps burned through the night, and tables overflowed with roasted meat, fruits, honey, and expensive wine. Servants stood silently beside their masters, waiting for every command. Musicians entertained guests during long feasts while dancers performed for powerful men laughing loudly in decorated halls. For the wealthy, every day was a celebration. But outside those beautiful homes, another reality existed. The poor crowded into narrow alleys and simple mud brick houses near the outer edges of the city. Laborers worked endlessly under the burning sun carrying stone, building walls, cleaning streets, and loading merchant caravans. Many families struggled to find enough food while the rich wasted more than they needed. Children from poor families often worked instead of playing. Some carried water from wells, others sold small goods in the markets, hoping to earn a few coins before nightfall. Beggars sat near the city gates asking travelers for help, but many people passed them without even looking. In Sodom and Gomorrah, wealth determined respect. The powerful believed riches made them superior to others. Every day, giant caravans entered the city gates carrying goods from distant lands. Traders from Egypt brought fine linen and gold jewelry. Merchants from Mesopotamia arrived with spices, perfumes, and rare stones. The markets became crowded with voices speaking different languages, creating a city full of movement and opportunity. Business was everything. Deals were made quickly, sometimes honestly, but often through lies, greed, and corruption. Wealthy merchants manipulated prices to increase profits, while judges accepted bribes from powerful men. Justice slowly became something only the rich could afford. Even hospitality, once considered sacred in the ancient world, began disappearing. Travelers arriving tired and hungry were often ignored unless they carried money or valuable goods. Strangers were treated with suspicion instead of kindness. The weak, the poor, and outsiders found little mercy inside these cities. Yet the people continued chasing pleasure and entertainment. At night, the streets glowed with firelight as music echoed through the city. Public celebrations filled the squares with dancing, drinking, and loud laughter. Rich nobles competed to display their wealth through massive feasts and extravagant parties. Some people spent their entire lives chasing comfort and pleasure, believing the cities would remain powerful forever. Pride grew stronger each year. The rulers of Sodom and Gomorrah believed their wealth made them untouchable. Surrounded by strong walls and fertile land, they felt secure. Many mocked the idea that their actions could ever bring consequences. But slowly, the moral foundation of the cities began to rot. Greed replaced compassion, pleasure replaced wisdom, power replaced justice. Families became divided by ambition and selfishness. The suffering of the poor became normal. Corruption spread from the marketplaces to the courts and even into the homes of the wealthy. Still, life in Sodom and Gomorrah looked glorious to outsiders. The markets remained crowded. The music never stopped. The feasts continued deep into the night. And beneath the bright lights and overflowing riches, the darkness inside the cities continued growing, unseen by many, but not hidden forever. In the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, religion was everywhere. Towering temples stood above crowded streets, their stone walls decorated with carvings of gods, kings, and mythical creatures. The sound of drums and chanting echoed through the cities every morning as priests climbed temple stairs carrying fire, oil, and incense for sacred rituals. To the people, the gods controlled everything: rain, harvests, wealth, health, and victory. And so the cities worshipped constantly. At sunrise, smoke from burning incense drifted into the sky while citizens gathered before statues made of stone, wood, silver, and gold. Merchants prayed for profit, farmers prayed for rain, soldiers prayed for strength. Wealthy rulers offered expensive gifts to temple priests, hoping the gods would protect their power and riches. Religion had become deeply connected to status and wealth. The grandest temples belonged to the richest parts of the city. Massive pillars lined the entrances while servants cleaned marble floors and lit rows of oil lamps that burned day and night. Priests dressed in expensive robes moved proudly through the halls as crowds bowed before them. But behind the beauty of these rituals, many hearts had grown empty. People honored ceremonies more than kindness. They feared losing wealth more than losing morality. Festivals were held almost every month. During these celebrations, music filled the streets as crowds gathered for huge feasts and public entertainment. Animals were sacrificed at temple altars while wine flowed endlessly through the city. Dancers performed before cheering crowds, and merchants used the festivals to grow even richer. At first glance, the cities seemed deeply spiritual. But beneath the rituals, greed and corruption continued spreading. Many religious leaders cared more about power than truth. Some priests accepted gifts and bribes from wealthy nobles while ignoring the suffering of ordinary people. Justice became selective. The rich received honor while the poor were forgotten. Compassion slowly disappeared from daily life. Travelers who entered the city hungry or injured were often ignored unless they could offer payment. Widows, orphans, and struggling families survived however they could while the wealthy continued building larger homes and hosting extravagant banquets. The people believed their prosperity was proof that the gods favored them. The fertile land, overflowing markets, and growing riches convinced many that nothing could ever destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Pride spread through the cities like a slow poison. Some citizens even mocked the idea of divine judgment. They believed power and wealth would protect them forever. As night fell over the cities, temple fires glowed against the dark sky. Priests continued their ceremonies while music and celebration echoed through the streets below. Noble families gathered around tables filled with luxury, laughing and drinking late into the night. Meanwhile, in the shadows beyond the bright palaces and crowded markets, suffering continued unseen. The cries of the poor grew louder. Corruption grew deeper, and the spiritual emptiness of the cities became impossible to hide. Yet most people carried on as if nothing was wrong. To them, Sodom and Gomorrah were still the greatest cities on earth, rich, powerful, and untouchable. But beyond the city walls, across the silent desert under the cold stars of the ancient world, a warning was already approaching. A warning that would soon change everything forever. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah continued shining with wealth and celebration, but something had begun to change in the atmosphere. The air felt heavier, the nights seemed quieter, and strange rumors slowly spread among travelers crossing the desert roads. Some spoke of divine anger. Others whispered that the corruption of the cities had become too great for heaven to ignore. But inside Sodom, few people cared about such warnings. The rich still filled their halls with music and wine. Merchants continued cheating customers in crowded markets. Powerful rulers ignored the cries of the weak while priests performed endless rituals beneath glowing temple fires. Life appeared normal, yet beyond the city walls, two mysterious travelers quietly approached the gates of Sodom as the sun began to set. Their clothes were dusty from the road, and they carried no gold, no servants, and no signs of power. To most people, they looked like ordinary travelers seeking shelter for the night. But these men were not ordinary. They were heavenly messengers sent to witness the condition of the cities with their own eyes. As they entered the streets of Sodom, people barely noticed them. Wealthy merchants pushed past them without greeting. Guards watched suspiciously from the gates. Citizens hurried by, focused only on business, entertainment, and personal pleasure. In the ancient world, hospitality was considered sacred. Travelers were supposed to be welcomed, fed, and protected. Offering shelter to strangers was a sign of honor and humanity. But in Sodom, kindness had become rare. The two travelers walked through crowded streets searching for someone willing to help them. Doors closed, faces turned away. Some people stared with cold curiosity while others mocked them openly. The city that overflowed with wealth had little compassion left. As darkness covered the streets, the travelers finally met a man named Lot, one of the few people in the city whose heart had not fully hardened. Seeing the strangers alone and vulnerable, Lot immediately offered them food, water, and shelter inside his home. He understood something the rest of the city had forgotten: mercy toward strangers mattered. Inside Lot's house, lamps flickered softly while food was prepared for the guests. Outside, however, the streets of Sodom grew increasingly dangerous. Word spread quickly that strangers had entered the city. Soon, angry crowds gathered near Lot's home. Their voices echoed through the night as they surrounded the house, demanding the travelers be handed over to them. The mob grew larger and louder, filled with arrogance, cruelty, and hatred. It was no longer possible to hide the true condition of Sodom. The corruption of the city had reached its peak. Violence, pride, selfishness, and moral decay now ruled the streets openly. Inside the house, Lot realized the terrible danger surrounding them. Fear spread across his face as the shouting outside became more aggressive. But the mysterious travelers remained calm. Then suddenly, the truth was revealed. These were not ordinary men. They were messengers sent from heaven. And they had seen enough. The wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah had become impossible to ignore. Every act of greed, cruelty, injustice, and corruption had reached the heavens. The cities that once looked glorious and untouchable were now standing on the edge of destruction. Outside, the crowds continued shouting beneath the dark sky. Inside, the heavenly messengers delivered a chilling warning. The time of judgment had come. And before another sunrise, the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah would change forever. Night slowly covered the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Golden torchlights flickered across crowded streets while music and laughter echoed through the warm desert air. From the rooftops, the cities looked peaceful and alive, brighter and richer than ever before. No one could imagine this would be their final night. The marketplaces slowly emptied as merchants packed away spices, fabrics, and gold coins earned during the day. Servants carried water jars through narrow streets while noble families prepared for another night of feasting and entertainment. Inside grand homes, tables overflowed with roasted meat, fruit, bread, and wine. Musicians played soft melodies while wealthy guests laughed proudly, speaking about business, power, and pleasure. To the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, life seemed perfect. The city walls stood strong. The land remained fertile, and prosperity continued growing every year. Many believed nothing could ever destroy them. But hidden behind the celebration and luxury, an uneasy feeling had begun spreading through the city. The air felt strangely heavy. Cold winds moved through the streets despite the warm season. Dogs barked nervously in the distance, and some people quietly whispered about strange travelers seen entering the city earlier that evening. Inside Lot's home, the atmosphere was completely different from the celebrations outside. The mysterious visitors spoke with urgency and seriousness. Their calm voices carried a warning that made the room feel colder with every moment. They told Lot that the corruption of Sodom and Gomorrah had reached its limit. The greed, the violence, the cruelty toward strangers and the poor, the pride and moral decay hidden beneath the city's beauty. Everything had been seen, everything had been judged. Lot's face filled with fear as he listened. He stepped outside into the dark streets, desperately trying to warn relatives and close friends. "Leave the city," he pleaded. "Danger is coming." But people only laughed at him. Some mocked him openly, others shook their heads and returned to their celebrations. To them, Sodom was too powerful to fall. How could cities filled with wealth and mighty walls disappear overnight? As midnight approached, strange silence slowly spread across the land. The music became quieter. The wind grew stronger. Clouds covered the stars above the cities. Even the animals seemed restless, as though nature itself sensed something terrible approaching. From the rooftops, guards looked nervously toward the dark horizon. Travelers camping outside the city walls whispered uneasily beside fading fires. Yet inside the banquet halls, many people continued drinking, dancing, and celebrating without fear. The final hours were slipping away. Inside Lot's home, the heavenly messengers gave one last warning. When the time comes, do not delay. The oil lamps flickered against the walls as silence filled the room. Outside, Sodom and Gomorrah still glowed beautifully beneath the night sky, unaware that history was about to change forever. And somewhere beyond the darkness of the desert, judgment was drawing near.